Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of What Is, the video series where I casually chat with you guys about games that I've played recently, give my thoughts and opinions and ultimate review and if you should buy it or not. Without a script, just casually have some notes here to keep myself on track. And with all being said, let's talk what is Krzyżacy, the Knights of the Cross? I say that with some pause because I don't know if I'm saying that first part 100% correct. So I'm just going to refer to this game as Knights of the Cross going forward. I do apologize. It is a Polish name, and I put it through some translators, and I think that's how they're saying it, but obviously it's an AI type thing, reading it back to me, so that's kind of how that goes. But this game is kind of, it's got an interesting history and story to it. So the Knights of the Cross is a actual novel that was written back in 1900 by a Polish writer, and but this game is being developed by a Chinese developer. So that's kind of where we're gonna get into some issues with the game, is because it's a Polish novel developed by a Chinese developer. And yeah, there's just a lot of stuff going on here. Apparently this novel is like mandatory reading in a lot of schools in China and obviously Poland and other areas of that world. So it's pretty well known story over there. I didn't know it was a novel until after I played the game and did some research into the game itself and just going through some Steam posts and all that stuff. But that is a pretty interesting, I guess, fact about the game. So the general plot of the game is you follow the story of a young man named Zabisco. I don't know if I'm saying that right either. I apologize. But you follow this young man, and he starts as just a common villager, and he signs up with his uncle to join the army. Because the army of his land is at war with this group called the Teutonic Knights. The Knights of the Cross is what they are, who are basically this just evil group of people, these tyrants that are taking land and all that stuff, all in the quote unquote name of God, or how they perceive what God's orders are, and yada yada yada. So they are at war with them, and they join the war, and it follows the story of this common villager joining the war, becoming a knight, and just everything in the sorts, from starting from there all the way up to him being one of the basically right hand man of the king, essentially. And that's the there's love interest in the game. There's all kinds of different stuff you can do as far as the story goes. There's a bunch of different side quests you can do to help out different people. A lot of different choices that you can make, and those choices actually impact the results and different outcomes of what's happening, which is pretty cool if you ask me. Sorry about that phone call. So it's got an interesting story, but where it lost me at times was essentially some stuff was lost in translation, is the best way to put it. It's a Polish novel being developed by a Chinese developer, and then so I'm not sure if it was translated from Polish to Chinese and then from Chinese to English, or if it went straight from Polish to English. But it feels like it was a one-to-one translation for a lot of the dialogue, rather than a localization of maybe working some stuff around to really have the same message put out, but obviously making it make sense in English. Because a lot of stuff, how it came out, was definitely didn't make sense at times. But it wasn't so bad where I couldn't grasp the story itself, where I couldn't understand what was happening with the story. I got the full idea of what was happening with the story and everything of the sorts. So it's not awful, but it was pretty jarring at times, the the story itself. Just reading some of the dialogue and stuff, it did take me out of it, but also found myself chuckling a few times at the story itself. I mean, it's what it is. It happens at times. That being said, let's talk about the story itself. Is serviceable. It's a pretty interesting thing. I might pick up the novel itself and read it just to see how the story itself compares to it. Something for the future, I guess, to talk about later on. Gameplay though, it's a pretty interesting gameplay experience. So it plays out like a JRPG, turn-based JRPG in a sorts, where like your side goes and then the enemy team goes, and it's a deck builder as well. So you have your decks that you can build. You have red cards, which are like physical attacks, blue cards, which are magic attacks. You have green cards, which are support cards, which will like give your team buffs and armor and all that stuff. Then you got gold cards, which also gives your team buffs of the sorts. And then there's one-time use cards that, like, once you put them in your deck and once you use them in battle, that's it. They're gone for good. So those are kind of need to be held on to for tougher fights for sure. You have a deck limit of 20 cards. So how you build your deck is really kind of crucial. You can spend gold to lower your deck limit to ensure you get the cards you want all the time. Because like once you spend all your cards, they go in the discard pile, and then once you run out of cards in your deck, you shuffle them back in. It's that type of game. As far as your teammates go, so you play as the young man. I'm not gonna try to butcher his name again. And then you have up to 3 other companions you can bring with you, which I suggest bringing 3 companions as soon as possible because these fights can get pretty tough. And each one has their own unique skills and abilities that they can do. Now, how do you get to the skills and abilities if all the cards are for our main character here? Well, based on the cards that you play, you will do the abilities for your companions. So let's say you play 2 red cards and a blue card. You can unlock some of the abilities for, depending on your character and your not your character, but depending on your recruits, it'll do a certain ability for them. And the more cards that you play in succession or in the turn that match what the recruits have, the stronger their abilities are, and the more they have up to ultimate abilities that you can do with them. So the strategy doesn't come from so much what's cards you have in your deck, but what cards you have in your deck alongside what recruits you have on your team. So you really want to build a team that uses the same type of cards. That way you are constantly using your abilities with your recruits. Because I found myself at times having my recruits sit idle, and those were some of the toughest fights for me because I didn't think ahead of, oh shoot, I have a recruit here that relies a lot on magic cards, I have a recruit here that relies a lot on attack cards, and I have a recruit here who relies a lot on support cards. So like I was trying to build a well-rounded party that could do all things, and that really might not be the case. You might want to find recruits that all have the same need for cards for their combos, and then from there try to figure out what they can do differently to support and buff your team and such. You can recruit new recruits every so often at the camp. The camp, you have a main base camp, and what's in your camp changes based on where you're at with the story. So sometimes you may not be able to heal up your party, sometimes you may not be able to recruit new recruits, sometimes you may not be able to buy new cards from the shop. So these are things you need to think about and plan ahead of time. If you have the recruit thing there and you have the gold, it might be smart to take a look at what recruits you have available and maybe recruit all of them or none of them. There came a time, honestly, last boss of the game, I was looking through the recruits that I could potentially have available to me, and there was one that would actually solve the issue I was having with this last boss, but I didn't have enough gold to recruit her. So because I spent it all on one cost cards. So definitely you got to think about what you're spending your money on wisely instead of everything of those sorts. And I kept accepting cards throughout the game where I could have been just not accepting cards after quests and battles, and instead getting gold back instead, because I got to the point where I didn't really need all these extra cards, and I kind of screwed myself in the long run. So these are things to think about. There's a lot to think about with the game. It's a pretty interesting gameplay loop itself. There's also relics you can add to your squad, which do different things. I had a lot of fun using relics that when an enemy on the other team died, it also inflicted the rest of the enemies with different status effects. So when an enemy died, all the rest of the enemies got inflicted with poison or bleed or weakness or stuff like that. Or after turn 6, the group on my side got a bunch of armor and stuff. So there's different builds within the relics as well to, how do you want to build your relics out? Do you want to inflict status effects against the enemies when one dies? Do you want to buff your team up with your relics? So there's different options there too you can think about as the game goes on. So the gameplay itself was, at its core, was really solid, and I really did enjoy it. They plan on adding more cards to the game to kind of spice things up as well. So that is there. As far as the art style goes, it is kind of like a 16-bit Super Nintendo style graphics there. And then when it comes like to the artwork graphics, it's still pixelated, and it is very, very anime, which kind of brings in like more of the wildness of this game. It's kind of all over the place. Like I said, it's a Polish game developed by a Chinese developer with anime characters as your characters. The developers actually made a post on the Steam forums where someone made a post saying, isn't it kind of weird how it's kind of all over the place? And they responded saying, well, yeah, you know, the developer grew up, read this book, loved the book, wanted to make a game on it. And as far as the art style, that's the art style a lot of people are familiar with in that part of the world. And that's, you know, what they were drawing. So it makes sense when they put it that way. Honestly, 100% makes sense. But if anime is not your thing and you're just not a fan of it, and you're not a fan of the risque outfits that the ladies have and everything of sorts, there is a unique Western style graphic pack as well, where when the recruits are up, you know, either on your screen, you're looking at the recruits or there's conversations going on, it's a lot more faithful to the Polish I guess style and such with their outfits and how they look and everything of the sorts there. So you can enable that. It's a free download DLC with the game. I'm not sure if it downloads with the game or not. I made sure I had it downloaded and to show it off here. And yeah, it gives a unique perspective to the game. It makes the story itself feel a little bit more serious as well, because when I played through the game, I didn't know about the Western pack, I won't lie. So I played it with all the anime stuff. So it was hard to take it super serious, but I can see the game having a little bit of a darker tone and stuff with this more serious art style, with the Western art style and stuff. Would I recommend this game though? It's like $14 on Steam right now at 10% off, so it's like $16 full price. I would. The gameplay itself is solid. I really enjoyed it. My first playthrough of the campaign took about 9 hours on the normal difficulty, and there's 2 more difficulties above that where the enemies hit harder. There's permadeath on your recruits, and everything of the sort. So there's a lot of replayability there. There's also a roguelike mode that you can access once you complete the campaign, where it just kind of, you know, gives you random things, and it's your typical roguelite type situation. So if you're into roguelites, if you're into deck building, if you're into RPGs, I definitely would suggest it. If you're into anime or not, you have your graphic style you can choose. And yeah, I definitely would suggest Knights of the Cross to you guys if it's something you are definitely into. Thank you all so much for watching the video though. I do appreciate it. Leave a comment down below what you guys thought of the video, what you guys think about the game, if you've played it, if you plan on picking it up, and any potential games you want me to cover in the future. I'll see you guys in the next one.